Well, welcome to today's celebration of life. Our musician today is Nick Kinney. And our opening song is found in the Pink Book, and it is page 13, We Gather Together. Please rise if you are willing and able. Welcome to the first Existentialist congregation of Atlanta. We are a spiritual community philosophically based on existentialist and feminist principles dedicated to human liberation and protection of the natural world. We make our spiritual home in the old stone church, which was hand-built more than 100 years ago by the African-American Antioch East Baptist Church. We acknowledge that racial hostility drove those African Americans from the area, and we honor them and the powerful history of this place. We also acknowledge that in the 1800s, the Muskogee Creek people were driven from this land, and we support justice for all indigenous people. And I would note that tomorrow is Indigenous Peoples Day, also known as Columbus Day to some.
Wow.
Those who are ignorant of history. Human relationships are primary in all living. When the gusty winds blow and shake our lives, if we know that people care about us, we may bend with the wind, but we won't break. Fred Rogers, who used to sing on television to children and adults across the land, "Won't You Be My Neighbor?" If anyone has community announcements, would you, if there's, should be paper on that table in the back, would you please write down the announcement, and I'll read them later in the service. Bring it on up to me. Are there any newcomers with us here today? Or perhaps you have not attended for a long time? Would you rise? Could someone bring the mic to them?
I'm here with my wife Lauren. We live in the neighborhood. We were coming because we were excited that there was a talk on Martin Buber's philosophy.
Welcome.
Hi, we haven't been here in a while, but we're particularly excited by the philosophical part of things, and as with them, we were lured in by Martin Buber.
Welcome back. I'd like to point out that if you are interested in more information about us, or would like to share information about you, on our program is a connection card, and you could also sign up if you like to receive our weekly e-blast, which is sent out by Sarah Drew, or our newsletter monthly, edited by Jan Lister. Does anyone have a birthday or an anniversary to celebrate? If so, if you are willing, you could step up and we'll sing to you. Okay. Our next congregational song is in the new book, in alphabetical order. It's "Lean on Me." Look in the L's. And please rise if you're willing and able. Our fellowship minister, Marcia Mitzner, is not present today. We'll move on to community announcements. On the last Sunday of October, that's October 29th, we have our annual Day of the Dead potluck after the service, so there will be eat and greet next week, and the October 29th scheduled excursion to Low Water Park is on hold. So that was a false rule. We're going to hold that. Any questions, please see Mary afterwards. Hold the presses.
Say all that again about the low water and then the Day of the Dead.
Yes, and Mary can explain that. She gave me that list. There was I think I have this right, the membership guild had invited us last week to join for a fall stroll and picnic lunch. Because of the Day of Dead, I think they're putting that on hold. Is that right, Mary? Or you never in? Okay. So we'll, see me afterwards if you have questions. I'll hook you up with Mary.
It's not today, it's Day of the Dead. Yes.
Okay. Please join us on Sunday, October 5th at the Old Stone Church, which is Existential's congregation. 15th. I have trifocals, and this is really small and tiny on these computers. October 15th is 11 a.m. service to experience 13 decades deep tone poem reflections on the Rose Hill community and echoes of displacement today. October 15th. Beacon Dance will present perception and invitation through the senses, October 13, 14, and 15 at 8 p.m. at the B Complex in Southwest Atlanta. This is a free performance, and see Patton afterwards for more details. Philosopher Martin Buber once said, solitude is the place of purification. That also can be said of silence, and we now have a period of silence for meditation, or however you would use it. There are candles on both sides of the sanctuary if you would care to light a candle for any purpose.
Walk in the light wherever you may be.
Your violin yesterday was fabulous on the Spanish song, wasn't it? Or should I say fiddle?
That's much more correct.
Our speaker today is Dr. Jon Herman, and he says that he's doing something today that he's never done before with an audience, and that is he has a handout. And you may have missed it, it was on that table, so Joe has volunteered to pass them out. Anyone else could help her possibly, but if you did not receive one, please put your hand up for this unprecedented event in the life of Jon Herman.
Marcia's idea.
Okay, Stella, I'll take that one. And then we'll do this one. Do you guys want to trade?
And if you don't get one, please try to share with someone. Dr. Jon Herman's topic today is what would Martin Buber do? The I-thou principle and moral action. Dr. Herman is a retired associate professor at religious studies at Georgia State University, where he taught classes in Asian religion, comparative mysticism, and critical theory in the study of religion. He is the author of Taoism for Dummies. I need that book. And he's written articles on topics such as interfaith dialogue, contemporary conceptions of spirituality, religious studies and public education, environmentalism, Neo-Confucian mysticism, and the late science fiction author Ursula K. Le Guin. He says he really does hope someday to finish his book on Martin Buber's unpublished lectures on the Tao Te Ching. Yeah. During his retirement, Jon has been authoring a liberal blog offering political commentary, and you can find that blog link on the back table and little slips of paper that you can take home with you. John's wife, Ellen, has served in numerous ministry roles and currently does volunteer work for the homeless. Jon and Ellen are parents of 2 young adult daughters, both adopted from China, Molly and Carly. Please welcome Jon Herman.
Good morning, and thank you again for having me here. Am I reasonably audible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, terrific. I have to say that when I first came here more than 20 years ago, when I was carrying fewer pounds and more hair, I was actually a little nervous about it because I was so used to talking in a classroom setting that it seemed hard for me to, or it seemed challenging to me to talk in an environment more like this. And in recent years, having been talking more about my own experiences, people I knew, smoking dope in the suburbs, things like that, I now feel like it's hard for me to translate back to something that is more classroom-like, you know? I mean, because I taught a class in Martin Buber once, but the enrollment wasn't even as many students as there were in this classroom. So I'll begin with an anecdote, which to sort of frame the story as best I can. In 1991, before I moved out to Portland, Oregon to teach for a year, start my first full-time assignment and finish my dissertation on Buber and Taoism, I asked my not yet wife, Ellen, if I could take both translations of Buber with me, because I'd be working with Buber. And she was appalled at the thought of that and said, you know, how can you leave me without a copy of Buber? And I remember her saying, it's like scripture. And then, as I began my studies, I encountered a quotation from Stephen Katz, someone who influenced me tremendously in the academic study of mysticism, and I still kind of identify myself as a Katzian. And he wrote of Martin Buber, I think it is fair to argue that Buber's central notions of dialogue and revelation are of far less value than is commonly thought, and shed far less illumination on theological and philosophical issues than their supporters appreciate. Can anyone really claim to understand in any meaningful way the notions dialogue and revelation when it is insisted that these events, and events he put in quotation marks, are aspatial, atemporal, acausal, non-empirical, non-sensual, non-linguistic, and only hintable at, if at all, through paradoxical statements? This claim, and the claims built upon it, must surely be seen to lack any persuasive or theological force. Buber's position cannot serve as the hoped-for new model of either interpersonal relations or divine-human relations. So, which is it? Is Buber's thinking sort of scriptural, timeless, universally inspiring, or is it a crock that has fooled, you know, the last 4 generations of existentialists? Toward that end, I will say that today, my goal, my task is to say that Buber's thinking has been applied in many, many spheres, many different places. I've seen Buber applied to education, art, ecology, religious dialogue, psychotherapy, athletic competition, self-help programs, and a woman in California wrote this spectacular essay on a Buberian retelling of Shakespeare's King Lear. Wow. Okay? So, but he's also incredibly misunderstood and misquoted and decontextualized. And I think my job today is to say, I want to go back to the beginning and see if I can kind of derive from scratch, using quotations from Buber's I and Thou, what that I Thou philosophy was really all about, and then try to ask the question of how does it relate to certain ethical issues that we confront today, and see if we can make any headway on that. Does that seem like a reasonable approach? Yes. So for that, I'll take a sip of water. Okay, so if you turn to page 1, Buber's I and Thou begins poetically, and then it just keeps running in that direction. Buber writes, and I'm sorry I didn't correct the language. The translations are generally have the gender-specific man and he, and when I tried to universalize it, I kept stumbling over the proper language to do it, and the German does say Menschen, plural of Mensch, which, is kind of male and kind of not male, and so, forgive me for keeping the translation that what was his name? Not Walter Kaufmann, the other guy. The guy who translated Buber, this is basically the translation as transmitted, so I'm not changing anything that he wrote in the translation. He said, to man, the world is twofold in accordance with his twofold attitude. The attitude of man is twofold in accordance with, that should be the nature of the 2 primary words which he speaks. Sorry, the 2 got transposed. The primary words are not isolated words, but combined words. The one primary word is the combination I, thou, or ich, du in the German. The other primary word is the combination I, it, wherein, without a change in the primary word, one of the words he or she can replace it. We can say I, he, or I, she. Hence, the I of man is twofold. For the I of the primary word I, thou is a different I than that of the primary word I, it. So, let me see if I can unpack that a little bit. I like the way it begins with him kind of telescoping in, that the world we're in, that is in accord with how we engage it. He says our twofold attitude. The German word Haltung, that we're translating as attitude, implies more, not just like, how do we feel, are we in a good mood or not, but the whole kind of orientation and affect that we bring to, with which we approach the world. And Buber seems to be saying we have two different ways with which we approach and orient the world, and that is world building for us, that creates the world in which we live. And that twofold attitude stems from what he calls primary words, or Grundwort in the German, ground words. Words that come from the base of our being. So the sort of elemental way of engaging the world, that which produces our attitude. He's using the metaphor, the language of, hard to say, of speech. It's a word we use, that our engagement with the world is through this elemental ground word with which we speak. And that there are two different ground words. One he identifies as I, thou. The other he identifies as I, it. He doesn't yet tell us what they mean, but he will develop that in the coming passages. And also lets us know, and this I always find interesting, that the I that engages the world in this I-thou fashion is somehow different than the I that engages the world in the I-it fashion. The self that acts in the world is qualitatively different when it speaks thou than when it speaks it. Whatever those mean, we haven't gotten there yet. And it reminds me of when one of my favorite professors once commented that he thought William James, when he talked about self, was sometimes less interested in the I than the me. Less the I that acts, less the self that acts, than the self that is acted upon, which I thought was very interesting. He also said, and if any of you have children, you may find that it's sometimes difficult to discern the difference between the me and the my. And anyway, that's a digression, but it stayed with me. And that professor was the professor who first taught me Buber, now that I think about it. Anyway, now that we've totally dispatched that first section, I only have so many minutes to do this, it's going to get a little juicier. Primary words do not signify things, but they intimate relations. So I, thou, I, it, these are relations. Try to think of it as we're never really talking about I, we're never really talking about thou, we're never really talking about it, we're talking about the hyphen. Okay? We're talking about what the relational quality of the engagement, of the attitude is, of the groundwork, of the primary speaking in the world. Primary words do not describe something that might exist independent of them, but being spoken, they bring about existence. They bring about this relational component. They create this hyphen. Primary words are spoken from the being, come from the self, whatever that might be. If thou is said, the I of the combination I, thou is said along with it. If it is said, the I of the combination I, it is said along with it. The primary word I, thou can only be spoken with the whole being, whatever that means. The primary word I, it can never be spoken with the whole being. So it's always I, thou, or I, it. It's never I, it's never thou. Whenever we speak one, it's implicit that we're talking about a relational engagement with the world, of which there are two varieties of engagement. What Buber is calling I, thou, and what he's calling I, it. With me so far?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Cool. Okay. That will be on the test. It'll be multiple choice and fill in the blank. But now it gets a little juicier. The life of human beings is not passed in the sphere of transitive verbs alone. I love that. We don't live only in our transitive verbs. It does not exist in virtue of activities alone, with something for their object. Now this part we have to read with the emphasis on the right syllable. I perceive something. I am sensible of something. I imagine something. I will something. I feel something. I think something. The life of human beings does not consist of all this and like alone. This and the like together establish the realm of it. Okay? This is the I, it. Okay? Anytime we think something, feel something, think something, see someone, identify someone, classify someone, categorize something, anything that uses basically language the way we use it 100% of the time in the world, this and like together establish the realm of it. But the realm of thou has a different basis. When thou is spoken, the speaker has no thing for his object. For where there is a thing, there is another thing, and every it is bounded by others. It exists only through being bounded by others. It exists, I'm sorry, I repeated that line, but when thou is spoken, there is no thing. Thou has no bounds. When thou is spoken, the speaker has no thing. He indeed has no thing, nothing, but he has taken his stand in relation. Now, think about this just for a sec. When we talk, Buber's going to use this language of, when you say I, thou, you're taking your stand in relation to thou, to that person to whom you're speaking. In English, when we use the word you, the subject you and the object you are the same word. You know, you see me, I see you. In German, it's different. Du is the subject you. So when you say, I take my relations, I stand in relation to the du, that's like saying, I stand in relation to the he, or I stand in relation to the she. It's using a subject where you would expect an object to appear, because you're implying a kind of subject-to-subject relationship, some alternative to seeing other as an object of your experience. And in an era, and in a period, and probably in a congregation, where experience is really very primary, is very elemental, Buber identifies the word experience as part of the realm of I, it. In the next paragraph, it is said that man experiences his world. What does that mean? Man travels over the surface of things and experiences them. He extracts knowledge about their constitution from them. He wins an experience from them. He experiences what belongs to the things. But the world does not present it to man by experience alone. These present them only with a world composed of it and he and she and it again. And then he says, and don't start trying to second guess what I mean by saying experience is bad. It's not like, oh, well, we really want inner experiences as opposed to outer experiences. Or we want secret, esoteric experiences as opposed to exoteric, available experiences. He says, no, it's none of that. And that's the next sort of paragraph there. If we add inner to outer experiences, nothing in the situation has changed. We're merely following the uneternal division that springs from the lust of the human race to whittle away the secret of death. I imagine what he's talking about there is imagining, the real self is the soul, which is different from the body. And he says, no, that's just because people are afraid of dying. So they're imagining an eternal soul, and this doesn't solve the problem. And then in the last paragraph there, it says, if we add secret to open experiences, nothing in the situation has changed. How self-confident is that wisdom which perceives a closed compartment in things, reserved for the initiate and manipulated only with the key? Oh, secrecy without a secret. Oh, accumulation of information. It, always it. As experience, the world belongs to the primary word it. I, it. The primary word I, thou is something else. It establishes the world of relation. And relation for Buber goes on page 2, which should be on the back. And so, though I'm running a little, I really don't want to overstay my welcome, but this is really good stuff. I would like to read a passage that I think is a spectacular passage. And it's a passage that, remember I mentioned how my not yet my wife didn't want me to take both copies of Buber. Well, a year later, she stopped being my not yet my wife, and we got married, and this was read at our wedding ceremony by my friend Randy from Connecticut. It said, "I consider a tree. I can look on it as a picture, stiff column in a shock of light, or splash of green, shot with the delicate blue and silver of the background. I can perceive it as movement, flowing veins on clinging, pressing if, suck of the roots, breathing of the leaves, ceaseless commerce with earth and air, and the obscure growth itself. I can classify it in a species and study it as a type in its structure and mode of life. I can subdue its actual presence and form so sternly that I recognize it only as an expression of law, of the laws in accordance with which a constant opposition of forces is continually adjusted, or those in accordance with which the component substances mingle and separate. I can dissipate it and perpetuate it in number, in pure numerical relation. In all this, the tree remains my object, occupies space and time, and has its nature and constitution. It can, however, also come about if I have both will and grace. And to my knowledge, that's the origin of the expression will and grace. I think so, really. If I have, even if we think Buber's a fraud, we get that from Buber.
Yeah.
If I have both will and grace, then in considering the tree, I become bound up in relation to it. The tree is now no longer it. I have been seized by the power of exclusiveness. To effect this, it is not necessary for me to give up any of the ways in which I consider the tree. There is nothing from which I would have to turn my eyes away in order to see. And knowledge that I would have to forget. Rather is everything, picture, movement, species and type, law and number, indivisibly united in the event. Everything belonging to the tree is in this, its form, its structure, its colors and chemical composition, its intercourse with the elements and with the stars, all are present in its single whole. The tree is no impression, no play of my imagination, no value depending on my mood, but it is bodied against me and has to do with me, as I with it, in a different way. Let no attempt be made to sap the strength from the meaning of the relation. Relation is mutual, and Buber will say this a lot. Relation is mutual. All real life is meeting. All real life is this kind of mutual connection and meeting. But then he says, but don't start putting words in my mouth. The tree will have a consciousness then, similar to our own. Of that I have no experience. He punts, and that beats me. I'm not going there. But do you wish, through seeming to succeed in it with yourself, once again to disintegrate that which cannot be disintegrated? I encounter no soul or dryad of the tree, but the tree itself. And as like a coda, he says, the relation to the thou is unmediated. No system of ideas, no foreknowledge, and no fancy intervene between I and thou. I, it, the way we engage the world is experience, objectification, using. Okay. There is something else, I, thou, which is a direct connection, a direct speaking, a direct engagement with, that is pure subject to subject, where one takes one's stand in relation to someone else. It is with the whole being. Now, I'd like to say that if we try to articulate, and what are the steps to get to I, thou from I, it, and what are the objective means by which we can say, okay, this relationship is I, thou, and this relationship is I, it. How do we argue this objectively, what this particular sphere this occupies? Well, the analytical philosophers with whom Linda Bell did battle with for many years would say this is why Buber withers on scrutiny. because we can evoke this. We can look at similar moments in our own experience where we felt like we were utterly present to other rather than experiencing or objectifying other. But we don't really have a purely, clear analytical route to say, aha, this is I thou, this is I it. And the people who sort of get it, this is inspiring. The people who don't get it, this is gibberish. Okay? But that said, the challenge is, as we live in the world we live in, and he says in the next paragraph, but this is the exalted melancholy of our fate. For every thou in our world must become an it. We need the world of it. And Buber, the Buber scholar and translator, the late Maurice Friedman, frequently said, Buber never said I it is bad. You need I it. You need to be able to distinguish between your bathroom and your closet. Or else you're in big trouble, But the overwhelming it, dwelling in the it, can make it harder to speak thou, can make it harder to tap into that other potential attitude we have. It does not matter how exclusively present the thou was in direct relation. As soon as the relation has been worked out, or has been permeated with a means, the thou becomes an object among an object, perhaps the chief, but still one of them, fixed in its size and limits. And the history of the individual and that of the human race, in wherever they may continually part company, agree at least in one respect that they indicate a progressive augmentation of the world of it. We are living sort of almost by necessity in the itification of our world. And Buber says that's okay, but he also says, a human cannot live alone, cannot live without I it. But to live in I it alone is not to be fully human. And he asks us to say, what are the fully human ways in which we can engage the world? Now, to finally get to the title of my talk, since I've taken a little time up here. So what would Buber say about certain ethical issues of our day? Okay. I heard a statement here supporting justice for indigenous people. Would Buber support the principle that we give justice to indigenous people? Would Buber be in favor of rights for LGBT people? What would Buber say about the conflict that broke out yesterday in Israel? By the way, though Buber lived in Israel, he was against Israel becoming a Jewish state. He felt that the Jews and the Palestinians should work it out. Otherwise, that it would create generations of anti-Semitism and warfare, which was a very unpopular opinion in Israel, by the way. And to some extent, I'm going to say this is very tricky, because I loaded the deck. When I asked the question, like, would Buber support the principle of justice for indigenous people, principles are I it. Doctrines are I it. Stated positions are I it. How do you engage an ethical problem then? How do you engage conflict with someone else? By speaking thou. By engaging them in an I-thou manner rather than an I-it manner. How do you do that? Well, that's not my job. The next speaker will do that. But how does one do that? And I think he would bring that to whatever the ethical question is of the day. That he would basically say, okay, your real question is not working out the principle. The real question is working out your own engagement with other, and then seeing what follows from that. In some ways, that's a lot like some of the Kyoto School Zen philosophers, whom I hope to talk about someday here, that come and say, no, you can't do this with ethical principles. You do this with transformation of self and bringing that self into the world. an analogy that comes to mind for me is, have you ever been in a relationship with a spouse or partner or significant other of any kind, where you have a fight, and one of you just can't say the right thing? No, you never have? Well, good, it's glad if you never had it like that. And the one who can't say the right thing says something like, what do you want me to say? Just tell me what to say and I will say it. And the other person says, no, I don't want to write a script for you. I want you to come to me with love and respect and then express what follows from that. No, it doesn't sound familiar? Okay. Well, anyway, there's a way in which I think Buber is doing that. He's saying, we've got to unwind the I-it and try and figure out the way to engage in a more present, more genuine, more authentic self and see what that produces, see what that brings. So, I have a colleague who I thought would be here today, but he must have skipped class. He's a good friend of mine. I've known him for about 25 years, I would say, maybe a little less than that, 20 years or so. And I think we met by bonding on our affection for Buber. And I heard him give a lecture on Buber, and I said to him at some point, so is your lecture coming from the assumption that the I-thou relation is an ontological reality? That there really is such a thing? And he thought about it, he said, yes. And I don't know if that's where I am, because in some ways I'm more with what a scholar at Lehigh and Lawrence Silverstein wrote when he said that Buber's basic concern was not to construct a philosophical system, but to render visible forms of contemporary society and provide an alternative way of thinking and relating. That it was a pep talk of sorts. And I think that once we dig into reading I and Thou and a lot of Buber's other writings on Asian religion and politics, and he had his fingers in a lot of pieces of pie, that I think it's really up to each of us to decide whether we think Buber was really okay, or whether we just want to say, okay, Buber.
Wow, John and Ellen, I thought Stella and I had an unusual wedding. I'm sorry I missed that. Okay. I've lost my, what's the closing slide? Ripple. And that's the new book. Okay, look under the R's in the new book, ripple, ripple.